Number 18. Quav Young. In March 2023, police were called to a McDonald's restaurant in Cocoa, Florida, where a customer allegedly threw a dramatic and colossal fit over a non-existent menu item. According to an employee who spoke with local station Click Orlando, 26-year-old Quav Young tried ordering a cheeseburger bundle. The restaurant does not carry a combo by that name, but an employee offered to sell the woman a burger and a small fry because it sounded like that was what she wanted. Things got out of hand during Young's second visit to the drive-thru that day, according to the worker, who said that Young pulled ahead to the drive-thru window after being told at the ordering station that she couldn't have a meal that wasn't on the menu. According to an affidavit, an employee asked Young why she was so mad, only to have the woman brandish a 9mm pistol and pointed it in their direction while verbally threatening them. In bodycam footage captured by a responding officer, Young could be heard denying the allegations. Police nevertheless charged her with knowingly driving with a suspended license and one felony count of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon without the intent to kill. Number 17. Junior Francis. People who are fascinated with money love to brag about it when they have it, and Junior Francis was no exception. The 33-year-old routinely posted selfies of himself holding giant wads of cash and otherwise showing off his extravagant lifestyle on social media, which were often accompanied by captions quoting rap songs about how he worked hard to earn his fortune. But when someone displays an abundance of wealth with no easily identifiable explanation for where it came from, authorities tend to become curious. Francis's braggy posts caught the attention of law enforcement, and in November 2014, police raided his home in South London and arrested him on suspicion of selling drugs. Francis denied being a drug dealer or having a large amount of cash, despite the fact that authorities found £75,000 worth of heroin and crack cocaine inside his residence, along with the suspected proceeds of his alleged drug-selling operation. He reportedly failed to come up with an explanation when asked to explain where all the money in his social media photos came from. According to investigators, Francis ran his illicit business through bullying and intimidation while boasting on social media about his ill-gotten gains. As the police pointed out, his vanity proved to be his undoing. Like many young criminals who are running into big cash for the first time, he apparently wanted the world to know that he was successful and failed to consider that he was making himself an easy target for law enforcement. In 2015, Francis pleaded guilty to money laundering and possession with the intent to supply. He was sentenced to 6 years and 8 months in prison, and one can only hope that he has put his business skills to honest use and is now making a legitimate living. Number 16. Caleb Hart. Shortly before midnight on an otherwise normal Sunday in Stillwater, Oklahoma in April 2023, a Payne County deputy attempted to pull over a vehicle for a broken license plate light. The driver, 25-year-old Caleb Hart, sped off and managed to evade law enforcement for the next several hours, even after a spike strip disabled one of his tires. He also allegedly blew stop signs, swerved back and forth over the center line, and struck a patrol car during the chase, which the pursuing deputy ended when his siren stopped working. While searching for Hart, Deputy Patricia Benavidez discovered his overturned pickup truck at an intersection. It was empty, and a subsequent search turned up no other signs of the suspect. When all else failed, a lieutenant sent Hart a text message stating, "In Glencoe, where you at?" hoping the suspect would assume it was someone other than the police. Much to law enforcement's surprise, Hart responded by sharing his location, bringing the lengthy ordeal to an unexpectedly easy end. He reportedly thought he was texting with someone he knew from drug court, and when he asked for the person's identity, the lieutenant obviously knew better than to tell the truth until Hart was in custody. Deputies reported to the location in an unmarked car, and Hart surrendered without further incident. He allegedly smelled of alcohol and had red, watery eyes, which was highly concerning considering his history of drunk driving arrests. Hart was charged with running a roadblock, attempting to elude, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, driving on a suspended license, public intoxication, and failing to carry a security verification form. He remains held at the Payne County Jail pending the outcome of his case and could reportedly face upwards of 2 decades in prison if convicted as charged. Number 15. Matthew Letham. It's a bad idea to commit crimes in the first place, but it's an especially bad idea if you have easily identifiable features that make you hard to miss. 24-year-old Matthew Letham, who has the state of Florida tattooed on his forehead, apparently missed that memo when he allegedly decided to attack a friend with a razor blade in October 2022. According to a witness, Letham and the victim were arguing over a cell phone outside a gas station in Hudson, Florida at 4:30 in the morning when Letham slashed the victim's neck and leg. Surveillance footage appeared to show Letham chasing the victim as he held a t-shirt to his neck wound. The injured party ended up needing staples to close the laceration. During questioning, Letham reportedly admitted to cutting his friend with a razor, but claimed he acted in self-defense. He had no visible injuries, making it hard for investigators to believe his story, and he was booked on a felony charge of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. Letham was released on a $10,000 bond and was ordered to have no contact with the victim as he awaited his next court date. He was also banned from possessing weapons. The outcome of the case is unclear, but this was not the first time Letham made news headlines for being arrested while sporting his distinctive head tattoo. In early 2021, he was accused of calling 911 twice to ask for a ride home and verbally abusing the dispatcher. According to police, a deputy found Letham walking alone on the side of the road in Pasco County shortly after he placed the first call. The deputy offered to call a taxi, but Letham said that he had no money and continued walking. Letham was still in the deputy's line of sight when he allegedly dialed 911 a second time and cursed at the dispatcher, who gave him a non-emergency number to call. He was arrested after the second phone call and eventually pleaded no contest to misuse of 911 and possession of marijuana. Earlier that year, Letham was accused of choking his mother and received a deferred prosecution judgment, which typically means that a defendant is given a chance to avoid a conviction as long as they follow rules set forth by the court for a certain period of time. Number 14. Jordan Mulcahy. In February 2021, 33-year-old Minnesotan Jordan Mulcahy allegedly got drunk and threw a microwave out the window of his hotel room in St. Cloud, Florida. An employee called the police just after 2 o'clock in the morning and asked them to remove Mulcahy from the room, claiming he had locked himself in and was refusing to come out. Responding officers were unable to locate Mulcahy until several hours later, when they responded to a call about a man sleeping in the entryway of a nearby apartment building and found their suspect snoozing away shortly before 7 a.m. According to an arrest report, Mulcahy made bizarre comments while a deputy transported him to a nearby hospital, including a statement about being at a funeral and him smiling, and stated that the officer would not be smiling then. Just a week earlier, Mulcahy had been arrested back in Minnesota for allegedly driving drunk, fleeing police, and threatening the arresting officers. According to a criminal complaint, the ordeal began when police officers in Sauk Rapids noticed a pickup truck speeding and squealing its tires. Mulcahy abandoned his truck while it was still running and attempted to flee on foot, but was quickly apprehended behind a nearby residence. He reportedly blew a .19 during a preliminary breathalyzer, putting his blood alcohol content at more than twice the legal limit. In addition to refusing a second breathalyzer at the police station, Mulcahy was accused of throwing a chair at a cop and promising to find him upon being released. He was charged with one felony count of threatening violence, along with misdemeanor counts for refusing to submit to chemical testing, driving while impaired, and fleeing a peace officer on foot. Mulcahy appeared in the news again 2 years later in February 2023 when he was accused of burglarizing a Florida office building while drunk. According to police, Mulcahy was vacationing in Clearwater when he entered the building, which was not open to the public, and was confronted by a cleaning crew member. A criminal complaint stated that he was seen leaving with a bag full of alcohol bottles in one hand and a fire extinguisher in the other. Responding deputies arrested Mulcahy shortly after midnight on suspicion of felony burglary and grand theft, as well as misdemeanor petty theft. He was held on $20,000 bond for the Florida charges, along with a felony warrant out of Minnesota for the recent theft of 2 laptops from a Best Buy store. Only time will tell whether he'll add to his growing list of convictions for assault, property damage, fleeing police, forgery, theft, robbery, fraud, DWI, false imprisonment, making terroristic threats, assaulting an officer, escaping from custody, domestic abuse, and disorderly conduct. Number 13. Caleb Concepion. If you're going to use a fake license plate, which is a terrible idea to begin with, it's best to use one with the most inconspicuous letter and number combination you can get your hands on. This apparently was not the line of thinking for 26-year-old Caleb Concepion, who caught the eye of police in Clearwater, Florida in April 2023, while riding a motorcycle with a phony New Jersey vanity plate bearing the lettering "Bend Over." An officer who attempted to approach Concepion on foot at a red light later noted that the suspect looked over at him and restarted the bike. Concepion allegedly ignored subsequent orders to stop and sped off through the intersection. According to an arrest report, he crashed a motorcycle just moments later. He was taken to a nearby hospital for treatment to his injuries and exercised his right to remain silent while being booked into jail under the alias Justine Miranda. Concepion was charged with a felony fleeing count for using high-speed, wanton disregard while attempting to evade law enforcement. Jail records showed that he was also wanted as a fugitive out of his home state. Number 12. Brandon Pressure. Police in Lawrence, South Carolina were alerted to a highly unusual crime in August 2021 when multiple social media users tagged local detectives in a video that showed someone tattooing a McDonald's employee's arm in the restaurant's dining room. The footage was captured by a disturbed onlooker who noticed what was going on when she became frustrated with the long wait for her food in the drive-thru and peered into the restaurant. When she noticed the disturbing activities in the dining room, she took out her phone and began recording while complaining about how the employee in the video was getting a tattoo at her workplace instead of working to get food orders out faster. In addition to the obviously inappropriate environment the tattoo was being done in, the situation was made even more disturbing by the fact that the suspect, 28-year-old Brandon Pressure, was not a licensed tattoo artist, and that the person receiving the tattoo was a minor. He was charged with misdemeanor counts of illegal tattooing and underage tattooing and was freed on a $25,000 bond while his case worked its way through the court system. Speaking with local station WBTV, Police Chief Chrissy Latimer said she didn't know if Pressure had previously inked any other tattoos in the McDonald's lobby, but she noted that he looked pretty comfortable in the video. Pressure pleaded guilty as charged and received a 9-month suspended prison sentence plus 18 months of probation. He was also ordered to pay several $100s in court costs and to perform community service. Interestingly, this wasn't Pressure's first time being arrested at that specific McDonald's location. Less than a year earlier, in October 2020, he was accused of stabbing a man twice in the restaurant's bathroom during a heated confrontation. He was originally charged with assault, attempted murder, but pleaded guilty to assault and battery. Pressure was initially sentenced to 3 years behind bars, but a judge suspended the term in favor of a 2-year probation sentence. Number 11. Kevin T. Matthew. While working as a lieutenant for the Bergen County, New Jersey prosecutor in 2022 and 2023, 47-year-old Kevin T. Matthew allegedly removed cocaine and fentanyl from the evidence room without authorization. According to authorities, Matthew signed the narcotics out from the main evidence vault in Paramus using database software, despite having no authority or valid reason to do so. He was a member of the Special Victims Unit rather than a narcotics unit, and his job duties did not include accessing narcotic-related evidence. Matthew is also accused of making substantial cash deposits at several banks during a time period that matches up with when the drugs were taken. The pattern of the deposits reportedly indicates that he was most likely trying to avoid the federal requirement for banks to report cash transactions upwards of $10,000 in one day. Several of the items Matthew took were returned in substantially different condition than when they were taken, according to authorities, who also claimed to have found 2 razor blades in Matthew's office containing a residue that tested positive for cocaine. The suspicious activities allegedly occurred over a more than year-long period beginning in October 2022. Matthew claimed that he returned the evidence in the exact same condition that he found it in. He is currently on leave from his job as he faces charges of official misconduct, tampering with physical evidence, possession of a controlled substance, possession of drug paraphernalia, and structuring financial transactions. Number 10. John Anthony Fields. After receiving numerous calls in the middle of the day about a suspected drunk driver in Spotsylvania County, Virginia in December 2023, deputies began searching for the vehicle in question. They didn't have to look far before the suspect lost control of his truck and slammed into Senior Deputy Tibor Kreiter's car head-on. Kreiter had little time to notice and even less time to act before the truck failed to follow the road curve and veered into his lane at full speed. Harrowing dashcam footage showed the deputy attempting to drive off the road and out of the accused drunk driver's path, but he was blocked by trees. Moving to the left also wasn't an option due to traffic. The suspect's truck swiped the left side of Kreiter's cruiser so hard that it took off a back wheel. Kreiter was treated for non-life-threatening injuries at a nearby hospital, while the suspect, 57-year-old John Anthony Fields, was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence, reckless driving, and failure to drive on the right side of the highway. He was released on bond pending the outcome of the case. Virginia has some of the nation's harshest drunk driving laws, according to the Department of Motor Vehicles. Even if it's Fields' first offense, he could lose his license for a year and be fined a minimum of $250 if convicted as charged. Number 9. Robert Lawson. In October 2022, deputies in Pinellas County, Florida, questioned a man who had been seen loitering suspiciously near a wooded area in Clearwater. Later identified as 50-year-old Robert Lawson, he gave law enforcement permission to search him and his belongings. During the search, deputies found a used syringe containing a brown residue and a crystal-like substance which tested positive for methamphetamine. Normally at this point during a police interaction, a suspect either tries to explain their way out of an arrest or they accept the consequences of the situation and cooperatively go into custody. Lawson tried an unusual approach and claimed that he was allowed to carry methamphetamine. He ordered Deputy Daniel Maddox to call the FBI and the Clearwater Police Department, who had supposedly given their blessing, but the law enforcement members at the scene naturally did not believe his story. Lawson was booked into the Pinellas County Jail on suspicion of felony drug possession and a misdemeanor drug paraphernalia charge. While this wasn't Lawson's first run-in with the law, it appeared to be the first time he ever tried to claim a legal right to carry drugs. He has a fairly lengthy rap sheet, which includes convictions for trespassing, battery, possession of drug paraphernalia, and consuming alcohol in public. Number 8. Kenan McDaniel. In August 2023, a 25-year-old Las Vegas-based rapper named Kenan McDaniel was arrested in connection with a nearly 2-year-old murder case after he published a YouTube video that allegedly contained details about the crime that only the killer would know. The murder in question occurred in September 2021, when a man named Randall Wallace was shot dead near an intersection during the early evening hours. Witnesses saw a suspect fleeing the scene in a white vehicle and told police that they did not believe Wallace was the intended victim. With little other information to go on, investigators were unable to identify a suspect. About a month after the shooting, a reluctant witness who had already spoken with detectives came forward and admitted to knowing more information, but expressed a fear of being labeled a snitch. The individual ended up sharing what they knew, leading investigators to identify McDaniel as a person of interest. But there apparently wasn't a strong enough case to charge him in connection with the crime until mid-2023, when a detective assigned to the case discovered a recently posted video for a song called Fade Free on YouTube. According to a warrant obtained by the Washington Post, the specific lyrics that implicate McDaniel are being withheld from the public and would not be common knowledge. But the warrant claims that McDaniel took credit for Wallace's murder and acted out certain portions of it in the video, which appeared on a channel going by his stage name, The Biggest Fin 4800. Court records show that McDaniel faces an open murder charge, along with one count of violating probation. Assuming the case goes to trial, the jury will be given the option of deciding if McDaniel is guilty of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, or not guilty. If convicted of second-degree murder, McDaniel could face 25 years to life in prison. He does not appear to be in custody at this time, and the current status of the case is unclear. Number 7. Clifford Craig Edwards. In March of 2023, a Florida couple spotted a man standing next to their new Nissan sedan outside a restaurant in St. Pete Beach, Florida, while making suspicious motions with his arm. When they confronted the suspect, he laughed and ran away. Upon examining the car, the couple discovered extensive scratching and paint damage to the entire driver's side of the vehicle, along with a butter knife laying on the ground nearby. According to a police report, the car sustained over $1,000 in damages. While reviewing the restaurant's surveillance footage, investigators noticed that the suspect had put his phone number on the wait list for a table earlier that evening. They called the number and subsequently met up with Clifford Craig Edwards, who was vacationing in the area from his home state of Missouri. Edwards reportedly agreed to speak with law enforcement after being read his Miranda rights and chalked the act of vandalism up to a spring break mistake, despite being 52 years old. At the time, Edwards' LinkedIn profile listed him as a licensed real estate broker and the development director of a firm that manages residential developments. He was charged with felony criminal mischief and released from the Pinellas County Jail after his wife posted a $2,000 bond. Number 6. Nicholas Overton. British serial thief Nicholas Overton already had 20 previous robbery convictions on his record when he targeted a supermarket in Newport, Wales, while dressed as a witch in July 2017. Donning a blonde wig, a long black dress, and a pointed hat, the 39-year-old entered the business, pulled a 2-foot-long machete, and cleaned out the cash register. CCTV footage showed panicked customers and employees immediately running away from Overton, who probably thought he would get away with his crime. But his disguise did nothing to help conceal his identity after 2 shoppers recorded him speeding off in his own vehicle. Police were quickly able to identify Overton as their suspect based on his license plate number. A high-speed chase ensued several hours later, with Overton reaching speeds of 70 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. He ran over a spike strip and was soon found hiding in the corner of someone's yard. Overton pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including robbery, having an offensive weapon, and dangerous driving. At his sentencing hearing, his defense attorney blamed his actions on his drug addiction, but the judge had little sympathy to spare, given Overton's extensive criminal record, and sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum of 4 years, followed by lifetime probation. Number 5. Henry Capuch. An employee at a bar in St. Petersburg, Florida, encountered an unpleasant surprise when he went to retrieve some ice during a late shift in December 2022. As he approached the ice machine at midnight, the worker, Richard Cleese, noticed a man urinating in it. When he told the very obviously drunk patron to stop what he was doing, the man allegedly cursed at him and shoved him several times. Later identified as 30-year-old Chicago police officer Henry Capuch, the suspect was on vacation at the time of the incident. According to an arrest report, he utilized both of his hands and shoved the victim in the chest a couple of times. Capuch proceeded to shove a security guard following his unpleasant reaction to Cleese telling him to stop peeing in the ice machine. Responding officers found Capuch on the beach nearby with his girlfriend. In their report, they accused him of being uncooperative while being taken into custody, stating the defendant was actively resisting and initially not obeying lawful commands while being detained. The report further stated that Capuch continued to yell and stand up while police were telling him to sit down. Capuch was released on a $650 bond after being booked on misdemeanor charges of battery and disorderly conduct. But the legal consequences of the incident were far less damaging than the damage to his career. Following his arrest, the Chicago Police Department announced that Capuch had been relieved of his police powers, pending the outcome of an internal investigation into the allegations against him. Number 4. Angelo Jackson Mendiva. While working as a security supervisor at a high school in Bakersfield, California, 27-year-old Angelo Jackson Mendiva teamed up with a student to run a business selling homemade explosives and bomb-building materials that they advertised on social media. According to court documents, the pair filled their Instagram business page with images and videos of their devices, which they shipped to customers across the United States. Mendiva and his young accomplice also exchanged messages about their products and business. In one message to his business partner, Mendiva included a photo and videos of an explosive called the Titanium Salute, along with a caption stating, "Homemade kills all consumer." During a search of Mendiva and his accomplice's properties in June 2023, federal authorities seized roughly 500 pounds of explosives and explosive materials from each household. In December 2023, Mendiva pleaded guilty to making false statements to FBI agents, as well as conspiring to engage in manufacturing and dealing in explosive materials and mailing explosive devices. He faces up to 5 years in prison and up to $1 million in fines, and is scheduled to be sentenced in April 2024. Number 3. Michael Gail Nash. Michael Gail Nash earned himself a spot on at least one dumbest criminals list in May of 2018 when he was busted counting his ill-gotten funds outside a First National Bank branch he had just robbed in Anchorage, Alaska on a Tuesday afternoon. Minutes earlier, he had allegedly entered the bank with a large backpack and handed the teller a note demanding cash, which was written on an affordable housing form with his name and birth date on it. The note stated, "This is a hold-up," and ordered the employee to put money in the bag, followed by, "God help us." Nash made off with just $400, and he didn't get very far with it since he decided to stop and count it the moment he stepped outside. He even sat down, according to news reports from right after the crime. No weapons were used in the robbery, and Nash was apprehended without incident. He reportedly confessed to the heist and was sentenced to a year in prison, followed by 5 years of probation, the latter of which he was still serving when he was accused of robbing the same exact bank again in October 2023. According to federal authorities, Nash approached the bank at 9 o'clock in the morning and began violently pulling on the door handles. When staff members told him through the glass that the bank would not open for another hour, he allegedly slipped a note through the door demanding money. This time the note stated, "This is a robbery," and instructed the recipient to put the money in the bag. It was signed off with, "God help us all." The supervisor who received the note immediately yelled for employees to activate the bank's secondary locking system and dialed 911. As the staff waited inside for the police to arrive, Nash reportedly loitered outside, waiting for the money he demanded to be delivered to him. A security officer urged him to leave, but he remained put. He reportedly appeared nervous and stuttering as he peacefully surrendered to responding officers. While being handcuffed and transported to the police station, Nash allegedly bragged about how it wasn't his first time robbing a bank. He was federally charged with 1 count of bank robbery and could face up to 20 years in prison if convicted. Number 2. Josh Cheeseman. During the pre-dawn hours one morning in February 2021, police in Penryn, England received a call about a man leaving a nearby residence following a drug-related argument. They caught up with the man, 27-year-old Josh Cheeseman, and noticed while they were talking that he seemed nervous. While searching Cheeseman's bag, officers found £550 cash and marijuana cigarettes. Based on these findings, law enforcement was able to quickly obtain a warrant to search the suspect's residence. 2 hours after the initial arrest, officers raided Cheeseman's home and found £1.5 pounds of marijuana, along with nearly £1,200 in cash and an illegal collapsible baton. Up until this point, the interactions between police and Cheeseman reflected a fairly standard drug investigation and arrest. But it must have been difficult for officers not to roll their eyes and laugh when he claimed that his marijuana stash was strictly for personal use. While it's certainly possible that he was telling the truth, it's rare for someone to have over £1 of weed in their possession with no plans to sell any of it. Cheeseman also told investigators that the cash found inside his home was savings toward his electric bill and that he carried the baton for personal protection after being stabbed a year prior. In court, his attorney argued that his drug-dealing activities only went as far as supplying friends who noticed he was stocked up during COVID and were in need. The young man's lawyer also claimed that her client used marijuana primarily for his own therapeutic benefit and that he had earned his college degree as his case worked its way through the court system. To be fair, it was Cheeseman's first time facing criminal charges. The judge acknowledged that there was an element of naivety to the defendant's illicit activities and that he experienced limited financial gain from selling marijuana. Cheeseman received a 12-month community order, which means that he was required to follow certain rules put forth by the court for a year, and he was also ordered to perform community service. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. Number 1. Michael Keanu Brennan. 24-year-old Michael Keanu Brennan was nabbed by law enforcement during the summer of 2023 after allegedly using stolen credit card information to pay the $3,000 tab for a 17-night stay at a vacation rental in Pinellas County, Florida. The fun came to an end when he was picked up at the property in Indian Rocks Beach, located just blocks from the Gulf Coast, and taken to the much less scenic Pinellas County Jail. During a search of the property, police reportedly found a collection of driver's licenses, checks, credit and debit cards, and social security cards in various names. Brennan reportedly admitted to buying a stolen identity over the internet and using it to pay for the vacation rental. While booking Brennan into the jail, staff warned him that he could catch extra charges if he was caught with drugs or contraband while being searched. According to an arrest affidavit, Brennan said he wasn't carrying anything, but a deputy found a live .22 caliber bullet hidden beneath his privates during the search. Just as he had been warned, Brennan was hit with an additional felony charge for introducing contraband into a detention facility. He was released on bond the next day, with instructions to return to court at a later date.
Number 8. Whether it's beards, mustaches, goatees, or the groovy beloved sideburns, people have been rocking facial hair for thousands of years. Sometimes there's the occasional problem that can come from it, like getting food stuck in your stash or it's starting to get itchy. But it's usually never anything too serious. Sadly though, one man had his own beard turn against him. Hans Steininger was a pretty big deal during his time. In the 16th century, he was the mayor of his town, Braunau am Inn, located near Austria and Germany. Although the kind of man he was or how he served as a public leader has been forgotten, he still became a bit of a legend to the locals after his death. Hans was remembered for having a beard nearly 5 feet, 1.5 meters long. That's longer than some people are tall. Unfortunately, despite being such an impressive man, his death was anything but. On September 28, 1567, a fire broke out in the town, sending everyone into chaos. Usually worn tied up and out of the way, Hans's beard was loose, left flowing in the wind as he ran in fear. But while he was trying to escape, he accidentally stepped on the beard, causing him to trip and fall down his stairs. In this horrible turn of events, he managed to break his neck during the fall. But here's an interesting fact. The town of Braunau am Inn kept the mayor's beard. It's been preserved and on display for nearly 450 years since that fateful day. It's quite the artifact. So if you ever find yourself between Austria and Germany and you happen to visit this town, go see one of the most impressive beards in history. Number 7. Inventive Death. The Eiffel Tower has been a monumental and distinguishing landmark of Paris for hundreds of years. But despite being one of the most popular tourist destinations in the City of Love, did you know over 300 people have died at the tower? This includes the self-proclaimed inventor Franz Reichelt. The tragic event was actually caught on film in 1912 in a video that is now stored in the British Path Archive. It all started when Franz became inspired by parachutes. As the owner of a dressmaking shop in the city, he soon took his inspiration and turned it into an obsession. He wanted to create an easy wearable option for the life-saving parachute. But sadly, this would turn out to be his final ambition. Since one had been accomplished before in history as far back as Leonardo da Vinci's time, Franz thought his objective would be doable. He sought to improve the historic design through his own ideas, one of which where he changed the original canopy-type design and instead opted for a piece of fabric that was intended to catch wind similar to a sail in order to ease into a landing. In his early days of designing the chute, his creations weighed an astounding 154 pounds, 70 kilograms, which was anything but practical for the average wearer. But later on, through small improvements, he got the weight down to 55 pounds, 25 kilograms, an astounding difference. In the testing stages, Franz used multiple dummies, but they all failed, and eventually, he tested it himself and got a broken leg in return. Even with these failed test runs, though, he refused to change his design. Franz full-heartedly believed that the only problem was the height at which he was testing, so he tried something a little higher, the Eiffel Tower. At first, his requests to attempt the jump were adamantly denied until he said it would only be a dummy, but that was a lie. Despite the pleas from his close friends to not jump, Franz believed in his invention. While climbing the stairs to the top, he told the crowd that had gathered below, "See you soon!" And at the top of the tower, he waited for almost a minute before finally jumping. Sadly, his parachute never fully opened, and Franz hit the ground at full force, killing him instantly. If there's anything to learn here, it'd be to triple-check inventions and perhaps do a few more test runs before putting an actual person at risk. Number 6. Bank robbing. A lot of times, bank robbing in television and movies is portrayed as a high-risk and well-thought-out heist. But sometimes, things aren't always what they look like on TV. Most of the time, robbing a bank doesn't go well, and the thieves end up behind bars. But for Brian Douglas Wells, things turned out even worse. On an August afternoon in 2003, the middle-aged pizza delivery driver walked into a Pennsylvania bank with a frightening note. It told the teller to get a bag ready as quickly as possible with $250,000 in cash. To make matters worse, Brian pointed to a device on his neck with a 15-minute timer. It was a bomb. Frightened, the teller did everything she could but was unable to open the bank's vault. All she could gather was $8,702. Brian took the bag and the teller called authorities after he left. They found him 15 minutes later around the corner. He pleaded with the cops, saying that some strange men had put the device around him, forcing him to go inside the bank. He kept saying it was going to blow, but they didn't buy it. A bomb squad did appear at the scene, but they weren't able to stop the explosion. Brian died as the blast went off, ripping a hole in his chest. Despite Brian saying he was coerced into robbing the bank, some believe that he was in on the crime the entire time, but the plan just backfired. Others say his accomplices just let the bomb go off to take care of a loose end. Eventually, another arrest was made when a drug dealer, Kenneth Barnes, admitted to helping in the robbery. Even with this conviction, not everyone is convinced the truth was revealed. But if it turns out Brian was part of the mastermind plan, it's a pretty dumb way to die. So what do you think? Did Brian have any part in the robbery plan? Tell us your thoughts in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 5. Lava lamp. Remember being a kid and going to the arcade? You'd try your absolute hardest to earn as many tickets as possible to get the coolest prizes. And almost always one of those prizes was a lava lamp. As a kid, it seemed like the coolest thing imaginable and everyone wanted one. Well, as an adult, you're free to just buy one whenever you want, and that's exactly what a man from Washington did. You'd think as a 24-year-old grown-up, Philip Quinn would have had some common sense, right? Well, wrong. In fact, he for some reason thought it was a good idea to put his lava lamp on the stove while it was on. What's the worst that could happen? Maybe the stuff inside the lamp started to boil, or it just melted. Nope. At the extreme temperature it reached, the glass got so hot that the pressure built up, causing the whole thing to explode. Quinn was standing close by and a sharp piece of glass blew into his heart during the blast. You'd never think something like this could happen, but it did. His parents found his body later on. Philip died all alone in his trailer home, and the only reason they came to check on him was because his girlfriend called them worried after not hearing from him for a while. After his body was examined, they determined that the shard didn't kill Philip instantly. He was able to make his way into his room before dying of blood loss. Surprisingly, he wasn't intoxicated or under the influence of any drug. He just wanted to see what would happen to the lava lamp. So to everyone watching, learn from Philip's mistake, and next time you want to try something questionable, just Google it first. Number 4. German Shepherd. Almost everyone loves dogs. They're cute, cuddly, and loyal, and make the perfect pets. But some people like these animals way too much. Some poor dogs are abused by people seeking out ways to satisfy their own sick form of self-pleasure. One of these abusers was a woman from Ireland that likely got karmic justice for her absurd actions. A man named Sean McDonald met the unnamed woman online after she'd reached out to him to have sexual intercourse with his dog. She traveled all the way from her home to Britain in order to do the deed and have Sean film the entire encounter to post on some pretty disturbing pornographic websites. But something went wrong after she was done. Apparently, the 43-year-old lady had an allergic reaction to something in the dog's sperm. When her death went public and Sean's participation in the ordeal came to light, he lost his day job and his family broke off all contact. And let's be honest, this is a terrible thing to do to an animal. He was sent to court for the whole ordeal, and the judge in charge of his case was so shocked by his actions that he put Sean on a public sex offenders list and made him go to court-ordered counseling sessions. Number 3. Cockroach. Food competitions and cooking shows are insanely popular. Whether you're just watching the event or participating yourself, they're usually safe environments to just relax and have a little fun. Challenges can include all kinds of food from hot dogs to pastries to insanely spicy foods and more. One of these contests took place in Deerfield Beach, Florida. The competition was being held at a local drugstore, and there were about 30 contestants in the running. So what were they eating? Well, they were competing to win a python, and to do so, they had to eat the most live cockroaches out of everyone else. One man named Edward Archbold was set on winning the snake for one of his friends, so he took on the challenge, thinking it would be harmless fun. But after shoving dozens and dozens of crawling insects into his mouth, Edward began to choke. Eventually, he died due to asphyxiation and the amount of cockroaches in his body. The insect parts had blocked the oxygen from being able to enter his lungs. The owner of the pet shop and everyone who witnessed Edward's death were shocked and horrified. Even though he died, Edward did sign a disclaimer before participating in the competition, so no blame fell on the shop. It is definitely one of the dumbest yet tragic ways to die that we've ever heard of. Number 2. Crashing cows. Imagine going to sleep just like any other night, only this time you never wake up. For many, that sounds like the ideal and most peaceful way to die. But what if it wasn't so peaceful? A man named João Maria de Souza was sleeping one night at his home in Brazil when out of nowhere a cow fell through his bedroom roof and crushed him. He didn't die instantly, but he did eventually bleed out due to the incident. The 3,000-pound, 1,360-kilogram cow fell from 8 feet, 2.4 meters high onto João. Apparently, the animal had recently escaped from a farm that was close by. João's house was right against a hill, so the cow must have gotten onto his roof somehow. João's wife quickly took him to the hospital to try and fix him up, but he bled out from the cow-related injuries. His family was devastated. João was a loving husband, brother, and son, and no one could have predicted something like this. The owner of the cow is yet to be discovered, but it's very possible that, if caught, he could go to court because of the death his cow caused. Just always remember to tell the people in your life you love them, because before you know it, they might be hit by a cow falling from the sky. And it does make you wonder, what happened to the cow after this incident? Number 1. Gun safety. There are many gun owners in the United States of America, and most of them that acquire weapons legally are required to attend mandatory safety classes in order to get a permit to allow them to have a gun in the first place. An older man named Glenn Seymour went through all of these steps as a reasonable gun owner should, but while attending one of the classes, something happened. He got a little cocky and decided to try out a technique that he hadn't practiced before, and it went very, very wrong. The move he attempted was a skill that's only taught in high-level courses, but Glenn was just at an average concealed carry class in Missouri. He should not have been testing out his ability here, but it's too late now. During the instruction, Glenn accidentally shot himself in the chest, and he died almost instantly. Witnesses and his instructor at the time said it was an awful accident that should never have happened. The gun Glenn was using was a 9mm semi-automatic handgun, and he'd taken the safety off. One of the first things they teach you when handling a weapon like this is to never put your finger on the trigger unless you intend to fire. But sadly, it seems that Glenn didn't remember this rule.
Number 10. Attack of the Rescue Dog. Aleksandra Prakowska was once a model for L'Oreal. The Polish national also worked as an actress when she couldn't find work. You might say she had the perfect face for TV. Unfortunately for her, that perfect face was ruined after she nearly lost her left eyeball after rescuing a seemingly innocent dog. In fact, she was blamed by the shelter for the attack, with them saying that she brought it upon herself by being a lazy dog owner. The incident went down in Warsaw when Aleksandra was rushed to the hospital with injuries to her face. Her new dog, named Logan, apparently went absolutely berserk after several months of living with her. According to the local reports, Logan had a troubled past and suffered from cancer. He was also known for occasionally being aggressive and has once even attacked Aleksandra's neighbor's daughter. Oh yeah, and the dog also bit the previous owner's neighbor's wife. Basically, the dog was a loose cannon, but Aleksandra was dedicated to her pet. Well, she was dedicated to it right up until the moment when Logan mutilated her so badly that her left eye nearly fell out. She's now probably never going to model again. Her face has been horribly scarred, and she has since taken Logan back to the shelter. She blames them for misinformation, giving away the dog to an unwitting owner when it was clearly dangerous. Number 9. Bite of the Serpent. A man from Limburg in the Netherlands was recently recovering in the hospital after spending 10 long days in a medically induced coma. The reason doctors put him in a coma is because he had gotten bit by a cobra that he was keeping in his cellar for fun. Maybe karma was teaching him a lesson? The man has not been named for privacy reasons. He's probably embarrassed, but according to the Brussels Times, he had several different exotic snakes kept inside his house. However, the cobra was definitely the most dangerous. The man knew it was dangerous too, because he had isolated it from the other snakes in his cellar. Amazingly, the pet owner tried to defend his snake and keep it away from wildlife officials. He told the authorities that he had been bitten by a random snake and that he didn't know where it had come from. Then it came out, months after the incident, that it was actually his pet. Authorities have since gone to his house to pick up all the exotic snakes he was keeping illegally, including the cobra and a pair of rattlesnakes from Texas. According to the wildlife workers, they weren't even kept in good cages. They were in plexiglass containers with sliding doors that the snakes were able to open by themselves. And after being busted, the man admitted that one of his rattlesnakes had bitten him before as well. He had already lost his finger to one of his exotic snakes, but he just couldn't give them up. He has since made a full recovery from the cobra attack, but with people like this, he's probably just going to find another cobra somewhere and put that one in his cellar. Number 8. Hungry lions. At the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, a zookeeper forgot that she had let the lions out. This is one thing you definitely don't want to ever forget while working at a zoo. When she walked into their yard to fill up their giant water dish, she forgot that they were prowling around the enclosure. Within just seconds of walking into the outdoor lion exhibit, the animal spotted her. At 60 years old, Nancy DeFiesta wasn't in the best shape for running away. The lions jumped, and she was helpless. To be quite honest, she is lucky that she survived at all. According to the Chicago Tribune, she suffered 64 puncture wounds to her head and body before zoo employees managed to get her out. The incident was investigated by the U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration. The investigation found that during the first 2 hours of the morning, zoo workers can sometimes make errors. This is the time of day when animals need to be fed and exhibits need to be cleaned. In this case, a single mistake of forgetting that the lions were already in the enclosure caused Nancy to almost be killed. She has since recovered, though she will bear the scars of her encounter for the rest of her life. She declined to give any comments to the media, and we don't know if she'll ever go back to working with the huge cats. Number 7. The deadliest lizards. Ronald Huff died in 2002. The story of Ronald and his lizards is one of the most terrifying examples of what can happen when pets go wrong. The police were mortified when they walked through Ronald's front door to discover he had been eaten alive by his collection of Nile monitor lizards. In fact, when the police showed up, the 7 reptiles were in the process of feasting on his corpse. At 42 years old, Ronald became dinner for his very own flesh-eating friends. For those who didn't know, monitor lizards are basically a mix between a crocodile, a dinosaur, and a Komodo dragon. These venomous creatures typically live in Africa, but have been popular household pets in the past few decades. According to what the former Newcastle County Sheriff told Animal Planet, when they knocked on Ronald's door, they could hear shuffling from inside. They knew someone was in there, but nobody would answer. They broke down the door, and there was Ronald. One of the lizards looked up, licked its bloody lips, and then kept eating. But this case was never technically solved. Nobody knows if it was the 7 lizards that ganged up and killed Ronald, or if he died from natural causes and then was simply devoured. Since he had allowed his pet lizards to roam freely around the house, it was impossible to say just what exactly happened. Number 6. Emotional alligator. A man named Joey Henry from Pennsylvania has a rather unusual emotional support animal. Most people have dogs for emotional support pets, while the occasional lonely person may have a cat or a rabbit, but not Joey, who recently registered his 4-year-old alligator to be his emotional support friend. The alligator's name is Wally. He's about 5 feet long, he weighs around 60 pounds, and he goes everywhere that Joey goes. This includes shopping at Walmart and watching baseball games. I'm happy to say that as of right now, Wally has not actually turned on Joey, but keep in mind that it's probably going to happen at just about any time. Everyone knows alligators are wild animals and not to be trusted. Alligators are more unpredictable than big cats, bears, or any other bizarre animal that someone keeps in their home. And speaking of keeping animals in their home, Joey keeps Wally inside a plastic indoor pond. And if you're wondering where you even get an emotional support alligator, Joey simply took Wally from outside when he found him wandering around at 14 months old. Wally actually became the very first alligator in America to earn the title of emotional support animal, and he's apparently helping Joey to deal with his depression. What do you think? Is it just a matter of time before Wally snaps on his owner and bites one of his legs off? Or do you think having a literal alligator living in his house is perfectly sane and not dangerous at all? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button. Number 5. Bad News Bear. Kellyanne Waltz has a captive black bear that she keeps with her husband. This beastly bear was 350 pounds, living at Kelly's home. She and her husband kept it in a cage, but it was still thought as a member of the family. Kelly's husband happened to be an exotic pet dealer operating in Pennsylvania with an expired license. They were absolutely not supposed to have exotic animals on their property, but this didn't stop them from having a lion, a jaguar, a tiger, 2 servals, a leopard, and the black bear. Since they were living in the Poconos Mountains, nobody really cared what they were doing, at least not until Kelly tried to clean the black bear's cage and ended up being mauled to death. When you hear the details of how Kelly was cleaning the cage, it will come as no surprise that she was killed. She opened the door to the cage, threw a shovelful of dog food to one side of it, then used the small window of opportunity to clean the opposite side while the bear ate the dog food. This time, the bear was not so easily distracted. When Kelly turned her back, the bear abandoned the dog food, and charged. She screamed in horror, but that only made the bear angrier. By the time a neighbor showed up with a gun and shot the wild animal to death, Kelly was already dead. Number 4. Killed by Big Bird. In Florida, a man was keeping a cassowary on his property. For those who don't know what a cassowary is, it's basically like a mixture between a flamingo and a dinosaur. It is a huge, flightless bird, native only to Australia and Papua New Guinea. These ridiculously massive birds can grow to be around 6 feet tall and 130 pounds. Their bodies are covered in huge black feathers. They have bright blue heads, and they have claws so big and so sharp they can easily eviscerate a human being. And that's exactly what happened in Gainesville when the victim was killed by his pet cassowary. According to the deputy chief on the case, Jeff Taylor, the victim was hanging out with the bird when he fell over. Nobody knows how he fell, if it was his own fault or if the bird somehow tricked him. But when he hit the ground, the bird saw its opportunity and attacked. It used its huge claws to mangle the poor man, literally tearing him to shreds. The San Diego Zoo says that cassowaries are the most dangerous birds in the world, able to run 31 miles an hour and able to slice open even the most dangerous predators with just one kick. Number 3. The Farmer's Pigs. Mr. Shustov was in his 70s when he went missing. It was New Year's Eve and his family was very worried. They beseeched the local authorities for help, but it wouldn't be until January 8th, over a week after the victim went missing, that police discovered what happened to him. To get a better idea of how things went very wrong for Mr. Shustov, keep in mind that he was a pig farmer. He lived in a small Polish village where he took care of 2 adult pigs and 12 piglets. These animals were free range, allowed to roam around in the yard, and even around the farmer's house by themselves. His neighbors told the police that the pigs were gigantic and that they ran wild across his property. Sadly for the pig farmer, he happened to be outside on New Year's Eve when he suffered a sudden heart attack. He fell down, probably died in the muck, and his corpse was there for his pigs to eat. His loyal, friendly pigs suddenly weren't so loyal anymore. On January 8th, the police found the victim mostly eaten by his pigs, with only a few scraps of him left, including some pieces of skull and bone. Other than that, the pigs had eaten every last part of him. Number 2. Attack of the Pitbull. In New Jersey, a couple were left with horrible injuries after being attacked inside their very own home by the family Pitbull. According to officers with the South Brunswick Police, emergency medical workers were called to the property in the middle of the afternoon, at which point they discovered a man and woman, both in their 60s, with serious lacerations on their limbs. The victims informed the police that the Pitbull randomly attacked the man while he was minding his own business in his bedroom. The woman ran into the room to see what was happening, and that was when the dog turned on her. Luckily, there happened to be another resident in the house, a guy in his 30s. The younger man was able to wrestle the dog off the elderly people. If it hadn't been for him, the dog very well may have ripped them both to pieces. Unfortunately, we can never predict an animal's behavior. Something must have made the dog snap. The dog was handed over to South Brunswick Animal Control, but they have not given any additional info on why the attack happened. We don't know if the dog had been feral or if its owners were simply negligent. According to the National Pitbull Victim Awareness Organization, sadly, there's a human death by pitbull every 13 days. And number 1, the Reptile Keeper. The zookeeper who almost died after being attacked by her very own pet reptile has defended the beast by saying he was just having a bad day. The animal handler just about lost her hand after the alligator chomped down on her arm during a children's party. Lindsay Bull was feeding Darth Gator, her beloved 11-year-old monster, in front of a group of children when it grabbed her by the wrist and then dragged her backwards into his tank. It likely would have eaten her if not for one of the guests at the children's party jumping into the water and prying its jaws open. But even after this terrifying brush with death, and in front of an audience of horrified children no less, Lindsay is defending her alligator with everything she has. She recently told Desert News, after being released from the hospital, that she is going to keep him and he is going to have no consequences for what happened. She says he was just doing what animals do, and while that might be right, she was left with a damaged tendon and multiple fractures. Number 10. Cab driver femicide. Former cab driver Ricardo Alexis Diaz was recently sentenced to 50 years in prison for one of the most brutal incidents of taxis gone wrong. This sick taxi driver is responsible for murdering a young student in Mexico. Mara Fernanda Castilla Miranda went missing in September of 2017 after taking a cab to the outskirts of Puebla, near Mexico City. According to the investigators, Ricardo, who was only 24 years old at the time, kidnapped Mara instead of bringing her to her destination. He took the girl against her will to a hotel, where he then strangled her to death. After the brutal murder, he dumped her body in a ditch, where it was found several days later. It's unclear what the motive behind the killing was. Ricardo had been a taxi driver for a while and could have killed any number of people, but he just seems to have snapped when Mara got into his cab. The dead girl's mother told local news that she was satisfied with the sentence of 50 years, though she would have preferred 60 years. She also said that although Ricardo is being punished by the authorities, a divine punishment will come from him in time. Number 9. An opportunistic murder. After a couple forgot their keys in a cab, their worst nightmare came to life. It was a Saturday morning in Brazil when Marcelo Sala was contacted to give the couple a ride to Florencio Varela. It was a 7-hour drive, which passed completely normal without any incident. However, the couple asked that the driver wait for them outside. When the couple got out of the car, Marcelo noticed that they had left their keys and a fanny pack in the back seat. He decided it was a great opportunity to take their keys, drive back to their house, and rob them blind. So, Marcelo did just that. He took off without them, drove back to their house, and then used the keys to get inside. Marcelo thought nobody would be home. However, the daughter of his passengers was in the house. At just 23 years old, Eileen Estefanda Arredondo got into a fight with the old man when he used her parents' keys to get inside. The fight turned violent, with Marcelo beating the poor girl until she was completely disfigured. According to official sources, he beat her so badly that she died right there on the floor of her very own house. And here's where things got really dramatic. As Marcelo tried to leave, the neighbors caught him and made a civilian arrest. They held him until the police arrived, at which point the police took him away. We don't know what's become of Marcelo, the murderer, but he's almost certainly never going to see the light of day again for what he did. Number 8. North Irish drug smuggler. During the pandemic, a taxi driver from Northern Ireland wanted to make a bit of easy money, so he decided to get into a business of smuggling drugs. He was recently busted, along with his 2 accomplices, in an operation that consisted in smuggling over $500,000 worth of cannabis between the capital of Belfast and Dungannon. Damien Gildernew was the brains behind the operation, busted by police when they stopped his taxi in an underground parking lot and found over 10 kilos of cannabis in the trunk. When the police searched the apartment upstairs, they found another 16 kilos of cannabis in a cupboard in his bedroom. The weed was vacuum sealed in plastic bags, ready for distribution. In total, that's almost 60 pounds of pot. The arrest came following a long investigation in which the police watched surveillance footage outside the apartment where Gildernew was busted. The police saw that he was going to and from the apartment at random times, suggesting he was moving drugs. As it turns out, he was a regular courier hauling weed between one city and another, but he was only getting paid around $200 each journey. The money from the pot didn't actually go to him. He was simply getting paid to move it. It wasn't a very lucrative operation and proved to be significantly more trouble than it was worth. Number 7. Taxi battering ram. In Hong Kong, a taxi was used like a battering ram when it crashed into a pedestrian island, killing 1 and injuring almost 10. The crash was an accident. The taxi driver never actually intended to kill anyone. Instead, he was just old and driving dangerously. According to the local Hong Kong police, the driver was 63 years old at the time and had since been arrested for dangerous driving. The incident occurred on Tai Po Road when he seemingly lost control of his cab and smashed into the pedestrian island where people were waiting to cross the street. After the impact, a pregnant woman was left trapped underneath his ruined taxi. Luckily, some good Samaritans rushed into the street and worked together to lift the taxi off the pregnant woman, saving her from certain death. Among the victims rushed to the hospital was an elderly woman and a 4-year-old boy. Another woman was unconscious and had to be carried to the nearest hospital, while another 3 victims were rushed to the hospital, but not in serious condition. As for the person who died following the brutal crash, they have yet to be identified by the authorities. So far as we know, the person died immediately after getting run over by the rogue taxi. Number 6. Taxi killer. Christopher Hollowell is a maniac murderer who used to drive a cab in York, England. He was actually in jail, serving a life sentence for killing Sean O'Callaghan back in 2011 when he was charged with yet another murder from 2003 of Becky Godden. But the real horror story is that since then, Christopher has confessed to even more mysterious killings that would make him one of the worst serial killers in English history. But to understand the taxi killer a bit better, let's back up to before he was arrested. At 52 years old, Christopher was living with his partner and his 3 daughters. Fellow taxi driver Neil Barnett described Christopher as a really nice guy and a totally normal person. But what his friends, coworkers, and family didn't know was that Christopher had a dark side. He was secretly using prostitutes in his spare time. He was getting rough and weird, with some of them being forced to call for help. His nightly activities came to a grinding halt when he was directly connected to the murder of Sean O'Callaghan. But he has also been linked to the disappearance of a girl named Claudia Lawrence. Even more disturbing is that police found a secret trophy trunk filled with women's clothing, about 60 articles in total. 2 of the items were identified, as one belonging to Sean and the other to Becky Godden. The other 58 are still unknown, suggesting Christopher may have killed upwards of 60 women throughout his entire life. Number 5. Road rage. Taxi driver Adib Ibrahim used his vehicle as a weapon to kill a man named Ralph Bizanet. It was a terrifying case of road rage gone wrong, and the driver has since been sentenced to spend 4 years in prison. How it all started is, quite frankly, a little shocking. The taxi driver had gotten into an unfortunate interaction with Ralph right before the murder. Ralph was riding his longboard when the cab drove a little too close to him. Upset, Ralph yelled at the taxi driver and hit his vehicle with his hand. It wasn't the end of the world, just a light slap against the cab. But the driver became so furious that he swerved his cab into Ralph's path. He lost his temper and tried to run the guy down. During court proceedings, it was found that the driver did indeed use his vehicle as a weapon with the intent of hurting Ralph, not just scaring him. The cab hit the longboarder. He was crushed, his skull cracked like an egg, and he died instantly. Superior Court Justice Robert Clark said the only merciful aspect of the incident is that Ralph had a swift death, though the kid's final moments may have been horrific. Number 4. Crack-dealing taxi driver. A taxi driver has been busted selling crack cocaine to fake passengers. The cabbie drug dealer, named Reese Hearn, was jailed for 3 years. He got caught after an unmarked police car got suspicious of his movements. The officer had witnessed Reese's cab pull up to a bus stop, pick up a lady, drive about 300 yards, then stop and let her out. Thinking it was a bit weird, the officer followed the taxi and pulled him over. Inside the cab, the cop found a stash of about $265 in cash, a phone with messages relating to drug dealing, and 10 pre-packaged bundles of 65% pure crack. There was also a Ziploc bag with 77% pure cocaine. Once Reese knew he was busted, he told officers that he was just trying to make a living. But what a measly living it was. Reese admitted that he only made about $600 in a week, keeping about $200 for himself and giving the rest to his supplier. Number 3. Killed by umbrella. Something terrifying happened in Brooklyn involving a taxi driver and an umbrella. Eyewitnesses told police that a gypsy cab driver by the name of Uro Ama Orji, an immigrant from Nigeria, was savagely attacked by his male passenger and the passenger's female companion as they got out of his cab on Thomas S. Boylan Street. The brutal attack was something straight out of a horror movie. The assailant took his umbrella and jabbed it into the taxi driver's eyeball. His eyes immediately burst open, gushing blood all over the taxi. His foot involuntarily hit the gas. The car sped for about a block, smashed into some parked cars, and the driver slumped over dead. The umbrella hit him so hard in the eye that it pierced his brain and killed him. Fernando Mateo, the head of the New York Federation of Taxi Drivers, said that the method used to kill Mr. Uro was barbaric and unheard of. He said he's seen stabbings and shootings, but never someone getting poked through the eye and into the brain with an umbrella tip. Police have yet to pin down a motive, though they did find the suspect. Shamel Allen, 28 years old, was discovered hiding in the closet of his friend's house by the police. They booked him, threw him in jail, and he has since been charged with manslaughter and a criminal possession of a weapon. He was even picked out of a police lineup, reducing any chance of him getting away with this brutal crime. Number 2. Inappropriate driver. A cab driver in Jordan was recently arrested after he got caught watching inappropriate adult videos inside his cab while parked on the street. This guy was such a pervert that he couldn't even wait until he got home, so he had to indulge while on the job. To make matters worse for this guy, he got busted on video by a passerby who uploaded the gruesome sight to social media. The authorities got a hold of the video, launched an investigation, and quickly tracked the guy down and dealt with him. But just wait, because the story gets even more gross. The arrest of the pervert came just days after 2 separate videos were shared on social media in Jordan of 2 different people, both cab drivers, committing indecent acts while alone and driving their vehicles through the city. The lesson here is to maybe stay out of taxis the next time you take a trip to Jordan, as these guys are clearly up to no good. And number 1, cabin in the woods. A taxi driver in Georgia met a gruesome end when she was murdered. Her name was Rosanna Delgado, and she was last seen on surveillance footage in DeKalb County on April 20th. 4 days after she was reported missing, her remains were found burned in a cabin in the woods. Her body had been cut up and the pieces set on fire. The only reason her body was discovered at all was that the police managed to track her phone signal to the site of the murder. The police immediately realized they were dealing with something terrible, so they went and checked through the local surveillance footage of the day Miss Delgado went missing. They found Miss Delgado shopping in a local store with a woman named Megan Colon, who they arrested on suspicion of murder. They have since arrested 4 more people in connection with the killing, with 3 suspects still at large. They have no idea what prompted the horrible crime, and the police are still pretty tight-lipped about the situation because the investigation is ongoing. What we do know is that most of the suspects will probably be charged in connection to the murder, either as murderers themselves or accomplices. As for the unfortunate victim, she was 37 years old and a mother of 2, just trying to make a living as a driver for Lyft. It's not like she had any money, so a robbery was probably out of the question. This may have been a simple cold-blooded murder, perpetrated by some real sick people.
Thanks for watching. Would you rather be featured on a viral dumb criminals list for an embarrassing but funny and forgivable incident that will forever appear in a Google search of your name, or live with knowing you hurt someone who didn't deserve it, even if most people never find out about it? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.